Yeah, whatever you want to do.
All right, so I didn't do an intro because I'm like, screw the countdown, whatever. What's up, guys? Mocha Dick Poon XOXO, fully adjustable, blow for freedom. What does shit mean? Um, yeah, guys, tonight I am here with Solomon Anderson. We all know him, we love him. We are trying to support him as he supports his brother. You want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hey, everybody. Like you said, my name's Solomon. My brother Zachariah was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide, hiding and disposal of a corpse, and 2 counts of stalking. And he has maintained his innocence for, at this point, over 3 years. So it's 36 and a half months that since he was arrested. So 3 years later, the family has unfortunately been dragged through the dirt and had to keep our lips sealed from the lawyers telling us that we should not be reaching out to people that were involved in the case. That includes unfortunately my niece and my nephews, and we weren't allowed to make public statements because they didn't want anything that we were going to say publicly affect the case, or affect his defense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's at this point, finally post trial, that we started to get the Free Zachariah Anderson movement off the ground, and that's what we've been working towards. We have about 1,100, just shy of 1,100 members in our Facebook group, a lot of which are asking what they can do, and I keep telling them that we need to continue to raise awareness, and that's what I'm here for today. So that means, like, coming up with clever, funny TikToks, or interesting Instagram shorts, or YouTube shorts, and things like that, to make sure that more people are engaging, more people are recognizing the hashtag, and it's just important because I think that this morning, Jeff and Rob from Law and Lumber were having a discussion specifically about my brother's case, and
Mm-hmm.
Rob had pointed out that what happened to Zach is not unique in our justice system.
Mm-hmm.
We have this happen with prosecutors across the nation, where there's little to no oversight, where there's a judge that couldn't care, that is pro prosecutor, that won't check their power, or their reach, and won't keep them in line. And there's no real consequence to the misrepresentation of fact, or the dumping evidence late, or anything like that. They don't care that they're lying to a jury. They don't care that they're misrepresenting what the case really is. And this is a huge problem for us all. And a lot of people have made a comment to me that, well, this happened to your brother, not to anyone. This is
Mm-hmm.
unique to your brother, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's frankly not. The prosecutors across our nation, judges that are biased across our nation, are doing this to people, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why we have so many people. I mean, I think I cited in my impact statement that we have over 25,000 years served by exonerated individuals. Like that should stagger us, that our justice system is doing something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you have 2 to 10% of convictions being incorrect, that these
Mm-hmm.
are innocent people being convicted for crimes that they didn't commit, this is something that should be alarming to us all, for a couple of reasons.
Absolutely.
It definitely unfairly focuses on the poor. The poor have less of an ability to be able to stand up and fight for themselves. There's a huge monetary investment in trying to fight for your freedom. So not only is it keeping poor people even further down than they already are, but
Mm-hmm.
but the reality is that we when people don't have the ability to have funds to pay for for specialists, for private investigators, and all these other things, there's a limited budget on your state appointed attorney. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to get a very good defense, or a good defense necessarily at all, for the charges that are waylaid against you. So it's even more important for us, as citizens of the United States, to recognize that this injustice is not okay, that is not acceptable, and that we need to do something about it. We need to really start talking about this, and that's what I'm here to do. And thanks for having me, Flex.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's one of the reasons, I'm having you here as well, is now that it is over, the trial is over and we have passed sentencing. Um at this point, all we can do is uh you know write letters and share this information with people we know to get eyes on this, to say, hey, guys, this is not a unique situation, and that should
Yeah.
terrify us. The
Yeah.
fact that someone can be like, oh, this is, unfortunately, not a unique situation in the United States. Oh my goodness, that should just terrify the living hell out of everybody. And I know, particularly for this case, it's pushed, like, for me, I really want to go to law school because I want to ultimately be a judge, but at the same time, someone like me, I would never make it in the system like how it is today.
Yeah.
And that should be so concerning to everybody. And the problem is, you know, unfortunately, trial watching is a particular it's its own particular thing.
Yeah.
You have to kind of be into the law in trials to watch these cases. And so I think it's so important, and I'm so happy that you are able to go on these different channels, because it's going outside of these trial watches. You know,
Hmm.
it's bringing awareness to, hey guys, this is a situation that desperately needs to change. And I'm
Right.
not sure how we do that, but it's got to start here.
Well, the
It's
reality
got to.
is that we have legislation in place for prosecutorial immunity and judicial immunity, which is
Mhm,
good in theory, right? Uh,
absolutely.
which I think should be maintained with exceptions. I think
Mhm,
that, personally, I believe that prosecutorial misconduct should see consequence up to and including fines and jail time.
absolutely.
In a situation like my brother's case, Michael Gravely lied to the jury. He
Mhm,
misrepresented the facts presented in the case. His closing statement was full of maybes and
mhm,
hypotheticals. He asked for the jury to trust him, and a lot of people bought that, which confused me because the whole premise of his closing argument was the well maybe, well maybe, well maybe, but the only reasonable solution is that he did it. But the reality is that it's not. Right.
mhm,
If you listen to his argument, and I've made this in the counterpoints to the key factors of his closing argument.
mhm,
The timeline doesn't work. The DNA evidence is arguable. We don't know
mhm,
exactly. It's not retestable. We don't know if it was contaminated. We have no photograph or video footage of that testing process or that collection process. We have no idea that the integrity of the evidence is there for that single speck of DNA. We have no idea where it came from or that it was in fact blood, and it was
mhm,
presented that way in the courtroom, and it was up to Judge Schrader to make sure that was maintained. The integrity of the evidence was maintained. But because of his own personal bias to the prosecution, he allowed him to do things like this. And he
mhm,
allowed him to present evidence that was not evidentiary, that was circumstantial, right? And I understand that circumstantial evidence is a form of evidence, and that the testimonial evidence, which is a lot of hearsay evidence that this case was specifically based on, is up to the jury to determine whether or not it's truthful in nature and what is evidentiary and not. I
it
understand the
bothered me the amount
face
of
of the law, but
hearsay.
the reality is that Schrader himself said in a criminal
It
case, he has never in 40 years as a judge allowed this much hearsay. He allowed more
Mhm,
hearsay in my brother's case, specifically giving the prosecution the ability to prosecute this case to convict my brother of a crime he did not commit. And
mhm,
that should also alarm us all because the inference to my brother's silence is as some sort of testament of guilt. That is just straight up against the Constitution. Like you're not
mhm,
allowed to do that. And
mhm,
and I just don't understand why the gatekeeper, the
mhm,
paternal figure in the room, or maternal, if there was a female judge, that parental figure was who's supposed to be the arbiter of the law, refused to engage and make judicial decisions in
Mm-hmm.
the courtroom. I've pointed out, like, even the juror situation where one of the jurors' husbands was related to a witness. He didn't do anything about it. The thumb drive that was presented, right, where
Mm-hmm.
Michael Gravely's mouthing along simultaneously, like he's a dance mom, right, like mouthing along
That was
off
so
stage.
bad. How in the world did that not get a mistrial right then and there? What
I
is
cannot believe it.
I could not fathom that. I could not. I mean, there were so many things about this case that I could not fathom. But the fact that the prosecutor was caught on camera, one, was so beautiful that it was caught on
Yeah.
camera. Like, the fact that it was caught, absolutely beautiful.
There's more instances too. People have found more clips where he's mouthing along. It's not the only situation. So if you go through the trial, like a lot of the people in our group have been doing, where they're going
Mhm,
through and they're like frame by frame, like statement by statement that people are making and recording them and watching them, recording like things that they've said, the objections, the rulings by the judge, like all of these things. There are other situations where Gravely was also mouthing along, and
mhm.
it should be alarming that we're doing. Yeah, you guys want like my jazz hands? I talk with my hands. Uh,
No, they're making fun of Gravely being a dance song,
oh,
being like,
oh yeah, his
"Hands,
jazz
die,
hands,
die,
jazz hands.
die." Yep.
Drinking water angrily up from the
Oh,
from the prosecutor's table, which
yep.
I mean, there was the moment where he cited in his 30 years of experience, and then John Birdsall says, "Well, in my 34 years of experience," and Gravely just like sits there, pouts, throws his little tantrum, slams his water,
Like,
like.
if he had gone on to be an actor, I think he would have been a hilarious comedian probably. With his facial expressions and his dramatic, like, I think he would have been a good dramatic comedian. But he chose lawyer, so sadly, uh, we got that.
Well, the good thing about being a comedian is you can lie through your teeth and nobody cares as long as you're funny. As a
Exactly.
prosecutor, I mean, when you defraud the court, it is a problem ethically and legally to defraud the court. It is not okay, and people need to recognize we need
Mhm.
to be watching more of these live feeds of trials, and we need to be doing something about it. Michael Gravely's an elected official. He needs to be removed from his position.
Oh,
Absolutely,
absolutely.
without question. He does not belong in his position, and anyone that maintains that level of conduct in that position should also be removed from his office. It is just completely uncouth.
Yeah, and as a person, I mean, how does he sleep at night as a prosecutor saying, "I will uphold the law and all this bullshit," and sit there and be like, "Yeah, I did good." With that, studying the law and knowing, I don't understand how he sleeps at night with who he's prosecuting and what he's doing. Because you would think as a lawyer, you want to uphold the law. That's what you study, that's what your passion is. Yet, when you take it and you bastardize it so badly, it was unbelievable to me. I could not understand how this is how a prosecutor was behaving and acting.
Yeah, and like Rob said, he's not alone. And that should turn everyone's stomach.
Mhm. And I think I can't I've been watching all your interviews, and I think it was with Viva when you said or when he was on the panel with like 8 other lawyers,
Hmm.
and how every single one of them agreed on how bad it was and
Hmm.
how horrible this prosecutor behaved. And when you get 8 different people from 8 different practices of the law or whatever, all agreeing on one particular point, misconduct, you might have some misconduct there.
You would think, if not just outright misconduct. I mean, he didn't
Absolutely.
follow, the American Bar Association standards whatsoever. Even
Mm-mm.
even in present, he did not do that in presenting the DNA evidence, which is why there's so many conflicting issues with the DNA evidence. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you actually watch all three of the crime lab technicians,
And
they
that.
say different things about the evidence. Lisa Treffinger actually struggles to try and present the evidence neutrally. She
Mm-hmm.
really tries to cover up the fact that the two alleles on the cell phone were someone else. She tried to avoid definitively saying that there was a 0% match for Zach and that it had to belong to somebody else. She
Mm-hmm.
tried to skirt around the topic. And it was,
Mm-hmm.
if you listen to the language that she uses, it's problematic that the expert that they brought on is giving a biased representation of the evidence,
Mm-hmm.
in almost the to the point where it appears as if she's colluding with Michael Gravely to try and get
Abs-
this to get this conviction. And that should alarm you too, because the scientists, the people that they bring in as experts, are supposed to be there to present the evidence as it stands,
mm-hmm.
their expert breakdown of it, and their
Mm-hmm.
opinion is not supposed to be evidentiary. Their
Mm-hmm.
opinion can be determined by the jury to be factual or not, but it's very important that the facts of the case are presented and the facts are the evidence. And then
Mm-hmm.
Michael Gravely is supposed to be held to that standard, that they
Mm-hmm.
might have opined that it maybe was blood because the data that they collected off of it was so good, or there was a good quality analysis. You need a lot of skin cells, but it is possible for epithelial cells, to which, for those of you that don't know, are just skin cells, to create a DNA profile very similar. And this whole exchange is just,
And
it's frustrating to watch.
that was one thing I really kind of wanted to focus on. One of the things I wanted to focus on was the DNA or the lack thereof. Because, earlier I had told you I went to school for criminal justice. I have my degree in criminal justice, and forensics was awesome. And from the second they started talking about this DNA, I'm like, bullshit. All of this is bullshit, 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 bullshit. And everybody's like, "Oh, there was DNA evidence, blah blah blah," and I'm like, "No, no, there wasn't." Because I mean, this was one of those situations where she literally, it was, well, it's not Batman's DNA.
Hmm.
That was this situation. Like, oh, well, I believe they said the DNA, they couldn't exclude him, is how they termed it, and I'm like,
It depends
oh,
on which DNA expert, because Lisa
exactly.
Treffinger said that it tested positive for Rosalia Gutierrez, but other experts that
They would.
testified said something else.
Exactly. And so how I saw that exchange was they couldn't exclude Rosalio. And I'm like, cool. They can't exclude Zach. They can't exclude Gravely. They can't and so there's no, that's not evidence, because to me and my eyes, okay, you can't exclude, and that's where the, you can't exclude Batman either. But if you're, if you, in a most likely scenario, because that's where I try to operate, you know, you have your extreme good, extreme bad, and then what most likely happened. I
Yep.
think that's, well, Occam's razor, right? The least amount of assumptions is
Right.
typically what happened. Cool, they found DNA in a van and they couldn't exclude anybody. Most likely conclusion is that it's Zach's. He was a or he was a construction and did demolition.
Yep.
There is, just in my mind, from those experts, that it is Zach's DNA and Zach's van that it is anybody else's.
I mean, my cousin was in that van. There's twin boys that were in that van.
It could be
My
their DNA.
Andrew was in that van, right? Like, all
I,
these people were in that van within days, within a week of the van being taken into evidence. So
mm,
there's the potential of there being a bunch of people that would have been there, and they said it's single source, and that's fine. But the reality is that Sadie was at Rosalio's, literally on the night of the 16th. That, to her testimony, she was at Rosalio's place.
mm-hmm,
How do we know that she didn't bring transfer DNA? We don't know. She
mm-hmm,
was handling things that were then placed in the back of the van. We don't know what was what was touched. The kids were playing in the van and doing stuff. She was handling the children. Like, this is a weak argument by the state, because transfer DNA is a very important thing to recognize in this
Mm-hmm.
situation. And I would say that people might have the right assumption, in aligning themselves with the state, if
Mm.
there was one iota of other DNA evidence anywhere else,
Anything. If there
anywhere,
was anything else to corroborate this pinprick,
right?
I might give it to you. But the fact that there is nothing, literally nothing,
Yeah,
you you can't, it doesn't fly with me.
yeah.
It doesn't pass my smell test.
It doesn't. It really doesn't, and it shouldn't to anybody else. One of the things that I mean, we kind of referenced it with Viva is the amount of evidence. So people have talked about this mountain of evidence presented against my brother, but the
Mhm.
amount of evidence that they presented really had nothing to do with my brother, and was not incriminating
And
against my
had
brother.
and had nothing to do with the case that was being tried.
Right. So I mean, the fact that they talked about this chainsaw, well, there's no evidence of a chainsaw ever being utilized in this case, in the disappearance or the stalking. Nothing.
Mhm.
It was completely irrelevant. The clothing bits that they found in the fire pit, there was no DNA evidence on them. No evidence of them ever being involved with anything that had to do with Gutierrez's disappearance. Nothing. It tested negative for them. So they spun a narrative that it was just him burning clothing for that, but that is a massive assumption. You don't know
Absolutely.
why he burned the clothes, and you're
No.
making up a story. You don't actually have an evidence trail that connects the burned clothes with Gutierrez's disappearance. Nothing that they came back with actually connected the two. Nothing. It is important to recognize the volume of evidence that they presented and how little of it connected to Zach. They spent days presenting blood evidence and evidence of the crime scene.
Mm.
None of it was relevant to Zach. None.
Absolutely none of it. Not even one allele of DNA.
None.
Nada. There was nothing. And it's like, you would think with this whole, with how bad the prosecutor said this scene was with blood, there would be something somewhere.
Yeah.
And I do believe it was with Viva. You said there, you're he's carrying a giant man. There's no blood marks, there's no drag marks, there's no nothing
Yep.
except a pinprick in the back of the van
Yep. And they presented this idea that he brutally murdered this man with the
with like a
in hand-to-hand
baseball
combat.
bat and a
Yeah.
knife.
Yeah,
And it's
and got no blood on, like, in his fingers or anything. They're like,
and
"Well, he wore
no
gloves."
injuries to himself either.
None. Yeah.
Like,
So how do you get in a fight with someone that outweighs you by 50 pounds, right? You get in a fight with somebody that outweighs you by 50 pounds. Even if you surprise them, what, they're not going to do anything in return, in response? Nothing.
mhm,
Rosario was very, very confident in his ability to fight. He
mhm,
even said, he was like, "I'm not worried," right? In referencing my brother for his own pride or his own experience. He was a man that felt like he could handle his own business. And
I
and now you're telling me that he never fought back at all?
I
Nothing?
think I think you were perfectly accurate when you said he was peacocking. He 100% was like, 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 yes, this man was not someone who was afraid of Zach. That's not what fear is.
Right.
Uh, Real quick, I do want to get to these super chats.
Oh, sure, rock him out.
Kim, thank you for the $5. Thanks, Flux and Solomon, for fighting this fight for all of us. Yes, we are. I mean, and like we have all said, this could be any one of us who fall asleep, literally. And I think that's another reason that should terrify you. Basically, based off of a 2-hour window, And that's another thing I would like the timeline. I didn't even realize how, because I was so stuck on the no DNA, I didn't even realize how poor the timeline was.
Yeah.
Like that's what they give him, like an hour and a half to do all of this?
Well, they presume that
Allegedly?
he surprised him at the door at about 10 p.m. That's what Gravely said in his closing argument. All right. So they say that he committed this crime at about 10 p.m. And there's,
Mhm.
give or take a little bit of time, but by 10:10 the phone's in the freezer and he has to be on the road to take the freeway back. 10:10 is when the phone was put in the freezer, right? That's when they allege it went into the freezer. It had its
Mhm.
position change or whatever it was at that hour. So that's what they've presented, that they heard the banging at about 10 p.m. and that at about 10:10, this position change. So that means in
Mhm.
10 minutes he wraps up this dead man, right? He kills the dead man, this man,
Mhm.
wraps up this dead man. Uh, Superman's him onto his shoulder, right?
Mhm.
Puts him on his shoulder.
Just
Fireman carries him out, just like a sack of
because it's
potatoes,
so
right? Puts him up
easy to
there.
just pick up a full ass grown man that's rolled up in the weight of a
Yep,
carpet.
just shy of 300 pounds, right? It's wet carpeting because there was blood on it, right? So you got
Mhm.
wet carpeting,
Which
and
magically didn't drop anywhere.
right, exactly. No carpeting. So that means that what you had to encapsulate it in some sort of plastic or protection, and then you have to have something to hold on to it because plastic's super slippery, especially when you're covered in blood.
Mhm.
So how are they envisioning this? I'm struggling to keep this thing cohesive in my brain. That what they've suggested is that he used rope and duct tape to secure this dead man into like a cigarette or a blunt, and he's a tube, right? That you then
Human blunt.
shoulder up.
Ugh.
Yeah. and then you march it outside and you put it in the back of a minivan, without getting DNA anywhere, without throwing out his bad back. It's so fantastical that it just does not make sense. And I feel like the jury was just so confused by the evidence presented that they relied on the closing arguments and they were like,
Mhm.
"Oh, well, I mean, that story kind of makes sense. Let's just go with that."
And I think
And
it shows that none of them have come out about it. None of them
right,
have explained their decision, nothing. So I think they're like, well, maybe we just whatever.
right.
I
I
think that's crazy.
so both the judge and Gravely used this reference to some plan, this high degree of planning, all this planning, plan, plan,
Mhm.
plan, plan, plan. But there was never a plan that was ever presented.
Yeah, that's what I think is funny. It's like, okay, so what was the actual plan? Oh, it was a plan and you did it. Okay, so what was it and prove it.
Right.
Ugh.
Prove to the court that this plan existed, period.
Mhm.
Prove to the jury that it was planned. And then maybe you have the grounds to stand on that this was a highly planned incident. I mean, if my brother had a history of murdering people, right? If he was like some sort of mob hitman,
Mhm.
I don't even know that he could have even with that level of experience committed
Mhm.
this crime, cleaned up the body, and gotten it out of there in that little bit of time. It's mind-boggling with the
Mhm.
the time frame that they presented and what they believe to be fact. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
No, I 100% agree with you. Really quick, we have uh John Gary for 199
No, that's
199
gone Jerry.
Gone Jerry. Oh, I do have a John Gary as well though.
Yeah,
Gone
John
Jerry.
Gary, I'm sure is in here. John Gary's our resident troll. So
Is
John
he? Cuz
Gary likes to pop into the live streams and tell me that Zach is absolutely guilty in his mind.
oh.
So I think that there's some supporters out
Oh,
there
wait.
that are the antonym to John
Oh, to
Gary.
Oh, okay, cuz I'm like I know John Gary cuz
Yeah,
I've seen him in chat before, but thanks for the $2. Baby Mikey's timeout water.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. That's Gravely when he tantrum drinks water. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, he would have been a great physical comedian. That's just my opinion. Unhung Hero for $5 says if Gravely's a Democrat, he'll stay in power. Kenosha's solid blue. It would require a move like DeSantis with the prosecutor in Florida. Mm, that's 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 sad.
I mean, I
I
don't want to make
hate.
it political. I don't think that Gravely has run against an opponent, and this is a problem, right?
Yeah.
Kenosha doesn't have anyone else to choose from, and how many people in Kenosha are really paying attention to this crooked prosecutor? It
Hmm.
seems that he has a history of sweeping things under the rug for some of the locals, and then the question is, is he doing that specifically to keep people, his constituents, happy?
Hmm.
And why? Who is he really connected to? And that's all supposition. That's all, theory crafting. But he's an
Yeah.
elected official in a town where, like, he prosecuted the girl that was forced into sex work, that killed
Yeah.
her rapist. That
I don't understand what that man, like I said, I don't understand how he sleeps at night prosecuting what he does. Like, how dense do you have to be?
yeah,
Oh, really quick, I just want to send a thank you to Wendy H for the 10 gifted memberships. This was a while ago. If you got a gifted membership, thank you so much, Wendy. If you're one of the lucky 10, give her a thank you because you are now one of my newest mocha dicks. You didn't even get a choice. You are just now a mocha dick. Which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, a mocha dick, back in the day when they did the whole sperm whale hunt, was a large male sperm whale. I say that for educational purposes so they don't yell at me. But
as
it's
opposed
true.
to as opposed to the Moby Dick, which is
Exactly. Which is
interesting.
the big guy. But yeah, no, an actual mocha dick was the term they used for a large male sperm whale.
Interesting.
Yep.
All right.
So education, YouTube can't get mad at me for saying mocha dick and all that. But thank you so much for the gifted memberships. Um, but yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand how people can look at this case with an honest, open mind and say, there's no doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, that's pretty, like, reasonable. Beyond like, where is the reason in this? I've been
I,
trying to find the reason and I can't.
we've got some people that were digging through a lot of the reasons why people claim they believe that my brother is guilty, and this is sort of like a weird. It's like staring into a kaleidoscope of human psyche, right?
Hmm.
It's this weird situation where people are claiming that he's guilty because he has a man bun, that he's guilty because he's a narcissist. He's guilty because the way he talks to his lawyer. He's guilty because he didn't show emotion during the trial. These are weird arguments to me, and the reality is, well, nobody's ever guilty because they have a man bun. That doesn't make you a murderer.
Mm-mm.
You know,
I
y-
think
me,
I I think on the very first day when we watched this trial, I had made that joke.
yeah,
Like, oh my god, he's got a man bun, he's guilty. And someone was like, I think someone took it seriously. I'm like, no, that's a literal joke. You cannot take and like what? What? How would anybody actually believe that?
I have no
But
idea.
people do.
Yeah, yeah, it's a weird thing. Like I said, it's an odd kaleidoscope thing where you're like looking into what swayed people's opinion, and what kind of visceral hate that exists, on this surface level judgment, that they're not willing to take the time to really review evidence, or to take this seriously. And like his conversations that he had with Nicole,
Hmm.
that itself is, he had spent 3 years talking, or just shy of 3 years talking to Nicole, and working through this case. They
Hmm.
respect each other, right? Like,
Hmm.
he thinks very highly of Nicole, very highly of her, and not in the, like, like he wants to date her or vice
Mhm.
versa way. That is legitimately like just an interpersonal like friendship where
Mhm.
she believes in his innocence and she's
Mhm.
willing to represent him and believes that he's not a bad dude. He's not this awful human being. And that's something for people to understand, that this, just because you're friendly with your attorney doesn't mean that you're trying to bang him. That's not what the situation is. You
Yeah,
know, it's
absolutely.
and the fact that they literally boiled down the relationship between a male client and a female attorney to only
Mhm.
the sexual aspect is disrespectful to Nicole and her professionalism. She is very professional. She loves
Mhm.
her job and she's very passionate about it. And people should never, never reduce a woman to that single
No,
aspect.
I
It's
I love her so much, and
She's a
just
boss.
she is an amazing lawyer. Like,
Yeah.
after that, I was like, I know she's not gonna do, like, interviews about that kid, but I just wanna interview her as a woman boss lawyer. Like, I thought she had such finesse. I like, in certain points where I felt like she just owned that entire courtroom.
Yeah.
And she was amazing. And the bet, like, one of the things that will stick out, uh, that does stick out to me, and it just one shows how old Schroeder is, and it just shows how much I love her. When I think it was towards the beginning of the trial, and he just kept going on and on and on. And she's like, Judge, I have to go to the bathroom. Can Are we gonna be done soon, or can I just be excused?" And he was like, "Well, let me take another 10 minutes to decide if I should let you go to the bathroom or ask a question." But the way that she was like, "Wrap it up, Judge," without saying, like, she handled him beautifully.
Yeah.
And it's kind of bad when I see a lawyer. It kind of looked like, a mom handling her kid, like, "Come on, we gotta go, wrap it up." Like, oh my god. It was just hilarious, and I love her so much. But two, it's another thing that shows she literally had to tell the judge to wrap it up
Yeah.
because he kept going and going.
Yeah, his
Uh,
old man rambling. I mean, he would be an interesting man to sit down in a room and talk
oh,
to with his experience with the law.
absolutely.
I think I do I think that Judge Schrader is an evil man? No, I don't think that he's inherently an evil man. I think that that he maybe he was seeing this case as an opportunity. It's potential that he had his own motive for allowing this case to move forward,
Mhm,
and he was definitely biased as a judge. But that doesn't mean that he's not an intelligent or capable, old man. And he's definitely slower now than he ever was before. I think that was
mhm.
observable. I didn't appreciate the fact that he was more willing to talk over Nicole than he was to talk over Gravely. I thought
Yeah.
that was disrespectful. But I mean, the other part of that I had talked about was the narcissism that people talk about. Like
Mhm,
the reality is, everyone has a certain degree of narcissism, right?
mhm,
I mean, whether it be through self-preservation or self-interest or whatever it is, some degree. So again, reducing a human being to one aspect of what is a normal piece of human behavior is
mhm,
also not fair to the defendant, because it doesn't matter who it is.
mhm,
Everybody has some degree of it. It's just some people have more than others.
mhm,
Can they say that he's absolutely narcissistic? Well, I mean, I'm sure that he's got narcissistic tendencies. Is he a narcissist? No,
mhm.
absolutely not. He wouldn't be as giving of a human being
Yeah.
if he was a narcissist. He wouldn't be putting money aside to try and help his family out if he was a narcissist. It doesn't
Mhm.
work that way, right?
Yeah.
That
I
doesn't make sense.
I mean, and my view, I mean, I don't know Zach, but my from what I see is I'm like, man, he was just trying to, like, grow his weed and, like, do his thing. Like, Man, of course they were gonna come down on him. Like the poor, like I was, I'm, man, like why? The poor guy was just, doing his thing, having his own business, doing his own thing in life, and literally one person said one thing. And that's what it took for the government to come in and destroy everything.
Take it all.
And I that's why we are going to continue to bring visibility to this, because there is no reason this should have happened the way it did. Um Real quick, I just want to thank Wolfram for the 10 gifted memberships. Thank you, Wolfram. I appreciate you, my dude. That's so awesome. So if you got one of the 10 from Wolfram, make sure to give him a thank you. You are now also a Mocha Dick. And we got a super chat from Crystal Dennis. Thank you, Flux. We always appreciate a platform for free Zachariah Anderson. Absolutely. And I know I'm just a baby little channel, but you have to go everywhere. Get everywhere. Do everything. Let everybody know. I mean, the couple that owns the gas station at the corner of my street, like
Mhm.
they know they're in the free Zachariah Anderson movement, because like they're with me. I told them all, like the people at the gas station know, all my coworkers, everybody that I have come into contact, I have to say something. This is one of those situations where you have to say something.
Yeah,
Um
because it's right. It's what's right.
It's the right thing to do. It's what am I personally getting from it? Just the satisfaction of trying to help an innocent American citizen. Like that is all that I want from this, and that is all we can do is spread the word and get it out there, because good lord, just I just can't. The one thing I wanted to ask, the whole carpet in the back of the van, his boss testified that it was gone before, like, this whole situation even happened, right?
Yeah, so Susan Brown Williamson had testified that she had seen the carpet missing from the back of the van. A bunch of other people said that they had seen carpet or they didn't notice it there. So there's a situation with this carpet where there's reasonable doubt that it was there at the time. I mean, if there's a situation where people are saying, well, it's gone, then this is an important thing to bring as evidence to the jury. Again, this is supposed to be a situation where you're presenting evidence, and there was evidence that that there was no carpet back there. I'm not sure when the carpet was removed. I don't know
Mhm.
for sure. The last time I saw the van, it was piled from bumper to ceiling with trash in the back.
Mhm.
And the trailer that there were pictures of was on the hitch.
Mhm.
And they started to unload the back of it. But I talked to Zach for a little bit before I left that Friday.
Mhm.
So I don't know for sure, but I went and reloaded the dumpster afterwards. After the cops had the dumpster company like just tip it and dump like the top little bit off the dumpster. Well, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but you've got a box that
Mhm.
that turns, right? So you
Mhm.
got this box that turns. Well, all the stuff kind of flows out like this, right? So all the
Mhm.
stuff in the top back kind of flows out over the top, trapping everything in the front. So
Mhm.
it's trapped against the front of the box as they tip it out. Well, they only dump like the top of the dumpster out. I
Mhm.
shoveled the contents back in. They never emptied the whole dumpster to look for the carpeting. Like I don't even know that the carpeting wasn't in the dumpster because
That
it was full of debris.
that blows my mind that they did not search anything. The fact that the police did such a poor, they didn't do any investigating.
They
Like
did a lot
how
of investigation, but it was like chasing their own tail, trying to confirm that my brother was the bad guy, as opposed to really looking at who probably did this.
Yeah, I mean, the text from Becky? Can we just like how is this not the biggest red flag in the entire world to everybody who has ever lived? That you get a
Yeah,
text saying it will happen next week? You won't that is a
it
hit.
will begin. She said it will begin next
It will
week.
begin
That's what she said.
that is a
Yeah.
hit. Like anybody who I have told like if I've asked, like, okay, what would you think if I said this to you? Oh, that you were putting a hit on me or something? And I'm like, thank you. And I mean, this
Yeah.
is my speculation. I'm not, this is my own speculation. I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. I'm not supporting this with any type of fact. I just think that maybe the hit went on the accidental wrong person.
I that it would be like Dumb and Dumber does
Yeah.
a murder, right? Like that
And I feel like
that's
that's possible,
I
unfortunately, in my
it
realm
it
from what
it
I
should
saw.
it should sicken all of us that that is a possibility that people are considering genuinely that it was like a hit gone wrong where they gave the wrong address. I
They
think
got the wrong dude.
that there's a possibility that when Sadie had told Rosalio Poppy no snitch, that Rosalio reached out to his friends that were what do they say in Pulp Fiction? Some hard hitting motherfuckers. I'm sorry if you don't want me
No,
to swear on the channel,
oh
uh,
no.
but that was a situation where if he called somebody to go beat my brother up and they didn't appreciate that phone call because it implicated them into a crime
Mhm.
and they were involved in some sort of organized crime, then they show up at his house like, "Oh, hey, dude," because they know him. He invites him in. He cracks a couple of beers. He's talking to him and things go sideways. That is a very plausible explanation for why he was beaten to death or near death in that situation and then left to the 18th. And the only reason why I say the 18th is because that that diffuser was still going. There's witnesses that saw, people there heard arguing, in his apartment on the 18th. That changed testimony later, but those were the testimonials of people that were canvassed in the building. So
Mhm.
there's reasonable doubt that he was robbed on the night of the 17th, and that
Mhm.
he survived to a certain extent and expired somewhere in the early morning hours, and that's an awful, awful situation. And I've said it many times over, but my heart goes out to Gutierrez's family and his children, his parent, his mother, of the people that love and care about him. I'm sure that he is sorely missed. I don't think that he was inherently a bad dude. I've heard wonderful stories about who he is, and it's important to recognize that this is a human life that we're talking about. This man
Mhm.
is gone, and he had a bunch of people that loved him as well.
Mhm. I mean, the thing, and on that note, the thing that bothers me so much is the fact that his friends went on Facebook and started broadcasting this, and that's how his son found out.
Yeah, it was
Like,
unfortunate.
that is that to me shows the friend. I don't understand how those friends were not looked at all, even in the slightest.
I thought
Nobody
that it
was
was
looked at.
it was odd. I think that there's like a psychological phenomena of someone that kills someone that they're close to, where
Mhm.
they want to be really involved with a police investigation, and
Yep.
I don't know for sure that this is the situation, right? Just as a disclaimer,
Mhm.
but Michael Campbell was one of the first people to show up at the crime scene, right, unannounced,
Mhm.
and he claims that he was told that Rosalia wasn't responding to text messages by another person that
Mhm.
that was somehow in that inner circle, that inner network, and it's sort of this odd and it just it's an
It
odd
does.
situation for him to show up independently, to then
Mhm.
give a statement to the police, and then to go on social media and insert himself into the police investigation by listing his cell phone number and saying, "Call me or the Kenosha PD to report anything that you know." And
That
I don't understand why you would do that.
and to me that screams guilty conscience. I did it. I'm trying to not have the finger pointed. Look at me trying to be so involved in this investigation. Look at me trying to solve this. It's not me because I'm trying to solve everything. Like
Yeah.
th- the amount, I mean, and okay, like I don't live in the same state as my siblings. But even if I did, if I didn't respond to a text for I think 2 weeks, maybe then I'd get a phone call. And these are
Yeah,
my siblings.
right,
And in what world do you not get a like you don't get a text back for 12 hours and you're concerned? I'm
right.
like, "Shit, should I be like, does my family not love me? Like, am I not loved because if I don't text back for 3 days, like eventually they're going to be like, "Hello?" Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to text. But none of my friends show up. I mean, I'm a terrible texter, but none of them show up to my house. And so I'm trying to put myself in a position where like if it was my wife and she didn't text me for 12 hours, I'd be concerned. But
Right,
that's my wife of almost 10 years.
right.
I
Yeah,
think if I had just told somebody, "You're gonna be my person," and then they don't text back for 12 hours, it's like, "Oh, maybe that was a red flag. Maybe they
right.
ran away."
I mean, fine. So it's fair that they talked, every day or whatever she testified to. Okay, so you talk
Mhm,
all the time. Well, I mean, he said he was going out drinking with his buddy. He was going over to his buddy's house. How do you
mhm,
know that he's, that he didn't get drunk or go out and hook up with another girl? You don't know. I mean, she met him
mhm,
in person, what, like a half a dozen times?
mhm,
She said that, well, they had an understanding that they were dating and, that they didn't have an exclusive relationship, but that's not the kind of stuff that she was saying right after he had disappeared. So if you
and
if you actually watch like the statements that were made from much closer to the disappearance to now, she presented herself as the grieving widow right after he
mhm,
disappeared, like that he was like they were in love and all this stuff was going on, which I thought was an odd presentation because she was with us on the weekend of like May 2nd. Like she was
mhm,
standing with all of us next to Zach, like talking and very friendly. It wasn't like it was, like, off or she was, like, afraid of him or trying to keep her distance. It was nothing like that. So the fact that she, talked about how terrified she was, how afraid she was the whole time, it's just disingenuous. The
mhm.
the grieving widow, commentary is disingenuous. Uh, it's
I I
it's
found
the
her
shifting testimony.
and that's the right I found her to be so incredibly uncredible. Because,
Mhm.
oh, it's, we weren't that serious, like, uh, we spoke, it wasn't, super, like they had a future together yet. But in other situations, she was like, "Oh, he was my person." Like,
Mhm.
I didn't understand how she shifted. She shifted a lot
Right.
in her behavior. And again, I don't really read too much well, body language is up for debate. We've all
Yeah,
talked about it.
that's junk science. Yeah, but,
But there are certain situations like you can tell when a person gets agitated. You can
mhm,
tell sometimes when a person gets agitated, they'll get more animated. But those like these subtle little things, but with her, I felt like okay, it was, he was gonna be my person. We were totally, in love, but we had only gone on a few dates. I was
right,
concerned, and then at the same time, when you also are showing affection to somebody else, it kind of makes you sound untruthful.
right.
And not to mention, the stalking charge really is irritating for me. And we all know how like why Because again, oh, I was terrified. I was so afraid. No, we all saw how pissed off you were because you showed that on the stand.
Yep.
Because if you want to talk about body language, her whole demeanor showed pissed off.
Yep.
And not terror, not. And I had told the chat, in the past, I had to deal with a stalker situation. When you're dealing with a stalker, you do not communicate with them. That is
Yep.
rule number 1, is you do not communicate with your stalker.
Yeah, you shut it down.
You shut it down, you block that nothing, because they're stalking you and they're putting
Yeah.
you in fear, and it's terrifying to be stalked. You don't say XOXO and keep texting them, and that's
And
not
you don't
how that
invite them over for
works.
Panda Express,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Uh,
you don't. That's not what happens.
and if you watch the trial footage, Zach having a positive relationship with Nicole, like
Mhm.
if you look, they like pan the camera, they switch the camera angle over to Sadie sitting in the gallery.
Mhm.
She's fuming.
Oh
She's
yeah.
sitting there. She's shooting daggers
The
at
side eye.
Nicole. She's so
Yes.
mad about it, and it's such a weird thing because she goes from from 0 to 10, like she
Mhm.
cranks it up in aggression and dismissive behavior, and like she just like she's so mad, and is really venomous towards Nicole when Nicole is questioning her on the stand. And
Yep.
I thought that behavior was interesting, because you have someone that, what is she feel threatened by Nicole because Zach is friendly with her? Is that the
Mhm.
situation? And then what happened to this idea that she was over the moon about Rosalio? What happened to this idea that he was her person in her
Mhm.
impact statement? Because she almost didn't reference this missing man at all. And I thought that
Mhm.
was an odd thing to do, especially because, from our perspective as a family, Zach was arrested on the 19th. We didn't
Mhm.
know what the hell was going on. We were trying to figure out, heads from tails. We had to try and find legal representation quickly because we knew that this was going to be a problem. And then we had to make really, really heavy decisions following that, knowing that they were trying to dig up evidence to try and pin this homicide on him in any way possible. So
Mhm.
we saw, down the barrel of the gun, figuratively, that this was something that the state was trying to build against my brother. And even though they didn't find anything and there was nothing of note, they continued to try and push. And that's why I've said this before. I told Lauren Onshoots, I said, you better be looking into everyone else that is suspect in this case,
Mhm.
because my brother didn't commit this crime. Right.
Mhm.
I specifically told him that, and that was August of 2020. And you saw how little investigation they did into anyone else, and that
They
included
didn't.
Sadie.
I mean, in a normal murder investigation, the significant other is always the first person assumed.
Well, the first
Like,
person on the crime scene is always the first person they look at most heavily. And if not the first
exactly.
person, then the second person. And they
And
didn't look into either of them really that well, did they?
I'm like, how is Sadie this? Again, I know that's, the mother of your, you know, uh, little nieces and nephews, but I'm trying my best to be respectful.
Don't say their names, please. I'm trying not to as well.
I'm just this I'm trying to be respectful of her. Well, not of her, because oh my god. I'm trying to remain respectful, but she, like, how? Ugh, how? I did a stream. I think it was last Thursday. It was a BBC stream because bitches be crazy. Uh and I'm going to be doing I think I'm going to start uh a series because it's these bitches that are coming in and ruining these dudes' lives for no
Hmm.
reason other than they're petty bitches.
Yep.
And it's like, one, Sadie admitted to, like, showing up, being the first one at the house. Like, you were the first one at the house to discover the scene. You are the significant other in your mind because you think he wants to be your person. How in any logical investigation, was she not the first one looked into?
I have no idea. And with the message on her phone about it beginning in a week, I have no idea how they didn't dig deeper immediately into her, even if only to rule her out, right? I
If only
realistically,
to rule her out.
yeah,
Because in my mind, she's prime number one. And unfortunately, the state did nothing to convince me otherwise because it alleged in my mind, my theory, hit gone wrong. She should have been looked at to as number one for conspiracy and how with that
right.
text message
Conspiring to
being
commit first-degree homicide, right? Yeah,
yes, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. I could how was she not the first one looked into and dug into, especially with that text message on her phone?
yeah, yeah.
And does this go into the whole like believe women thing? Is that
Kinda.
where you think this like
I
they
mean,
were
that
just
was
like,
something
oh,
that
the woman called, oh no.
well, that's something that Chandler and I talked about is that she presented herself as distraught enough, right, as shaken
Hmm.
enough that the cops were like, "Seems credible," and they just went with it. They didn't bother searching her vehicle. They didn't bother looking into her any deeper. They were like, "Well, she's clearly shaken, so I mean, of course, let's absolutely go with this," you
I
know.
mean,
And that's like, and realistically, I'm not saying that she committed this and that
mhm,
she conspired to do this. I think that text
that's what
message was
I'm
highly
saying.
suspicious. And honestly,
You don't have to say it, I will.
it's it's a highly suspicious text message regardless, and that needed to be looked at. But the question is then, was Rebecca Jekyll at fault then? Was she part of orchestrating this?
Oh my god,
And
Becky is a
and
whole name.
and,
That's my
and
opinion and I stand by it.
I've known some very wonderful people
Oh,
named Rebecca in my life,
oh.
but I see where you're going with it. I
No, it's
just
just Becky's. Rebecca's okay. Becca's okay. Becks are good. It's just Becky's. Becky's a hoe name.
all right, all right. I'm sorry that you've met so many bad
See,
Beckys.
no, we got Rebecca here in chat. She spells it the cool way. Uh,
Because
but
it's the ah at the end.
yes, it's that. Well, it's actually Hebrew, so it's
Yeah,
yeah, it's Rebecca.
Re- Rebecca.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Um, but with that text from Rebecca Jenkins, and then
Well, there's the
did they?
discussion about the phone before
Yeah,
that, right? Coming over to pick up this phone, this mystery
mhm,
phone that was never presented, never discussed further. So there's a
mhm,
phone that Sadie had gone over to pick up from Rebecca that was never looked at. What was on that phone? What did they discuss? Whom was being texted on this phone? Where did this
mhm,
phone end up existing? And why didn't the police dig deeper into locating this phone, especially with a suspicious text message like the one that was exchanged between Rebecca and Sadie? It doesn't make
mhm,
sense. Furthermore, they continue to discuss this certified mail. Did he get the mail? Did he check the mail? Did he check the mail? Which is oddly specific, and it's potentially something to do with the custody case. But the state's presentation was that Rosalia was surprised by this blitz tactic. As it turns out, his front door is right next to the mailboxes. Did he check the mail? Did he check the mail? Did he check the mail? And they're being cryptic.
mm,
And it's just a weird coincidence, right? And I'm not saying that they absolutely committed this crime or they colluded to commit this crime, but it is suspicious enough that the police should have done their diligence and
mhm,
investigated it, and they didn't. And that's what I keep hammering on. They didn't investigate this like they were supposed to. They didn't approach this with the neutral mindset of trying to locate who all had a motive to commit this crime. What their
mhm,
motives were. I've never said that they had zero reason to look into my brother.
mhm.
Fine. Sadie pointed the finger at him. They wanted to make sure to rule him out as a potential jealous party, and that's fine. That is a
Absolutely,
perfectly reasonable, rational thing to do for a police investigation into a missing man. Because the
absolutely.
reality is that they also never proved that he was murdered. They proved that he's missing, They've never proven that he's been murdered. So this is another problem with being charged with
Yep.
first degree intentional homicide with no
Yep.
body, no murder weapon, and no proof that the man is dead. There's no proof, which is
Because
why there's no death certificate and why his family can't get death benefits is because he's still missing.
and see, and here's the problem. The state could have corrected that by bringing in an expert to say, "Oh, the amount of blood that was in the um, area, that was not enough blood for a person to die." Like a lot of us have talked, there's a lot of blood in the human body, and the amount of blood that was found at the crime scene, in a lot of our opinion, I mean, we're not experts, but they didn't provide one. So,
Yeah.
in our opinions, that is not enough. And again, I'm not an expert, but I've done a bit of studying. I have at least, my degree in criminal justice. It's not forensic specific, but I've
I
done
mean,
the basic. It's That's not enough blood. And to
if
try,
Rosario is a big dude,
he's a
so he's like
big dude.
6 foot to 270. There's a lot of dude there, right? So
Mhm.
so like you can lose, depending on your body mass, 3 to 5 liters of blood before you decompensate, before you go into
Mhm.
shock. And I mean, some people can lose less when they're low BMI and things like that, or their children, or very old. But the reality is like there's like a range in which the body would go into shock, and the question is, Jen's saying no. Um, the question is, was there even enough, and did they prove the amount of blood loss? And it's sort of an
Oh,
odd
isn't
thing.
she a nurse?
Yeah,
So she would see? See?
uh, only have roughly 5 liters. So thank you. So that's so the average person 5 liters, but Rosario is a little bit thicker than the average person. So there's a lot of mass there, and I don't know how much blood he actually had, but yeah, you can lose 2 to 2.5 liters without expiring typically. Typically, again, typical.
And
And we don't know how much volume of blood. It was never measured. It was never weighed. It was never determined.
and that's the thing, is blood is very thick. So it may appear like it spreads, and it's like it looks like it gets everywhere. That amount of blood looked, what, maybe a liter of blood in that apartment?
Yeah,
I
I've
mean,
seen someone lose 2 liters personally, and I mean they didn't look good.
mhm,
They weren't doing great, but they lived,
mhm.
and that's that you
And
would know. 2 liters is a lot.
in my personal, like, again, in my personal opinion, it looked to be about a liter. I was gonna see if I had a picture, because blood spatter, everybody knows I love blood spatter. It's just fun to me. Like, gross, whatever, it's fun. Um, because I don't know, it can paint a picture, literally.
Yeah,
And
sure does.
so, uh I had when I was in class, we had a full day, just, well, it was more than a full day, but we had a full day to kind of play around with blood spatter, like fake blood and Tyvek suits, and kind of learn different techniques of like what different spatter looks like, and we just kind of, threw fake blood around a room all day. It was really fun. Uh but to me, it only appeared to maybe a liter and a half. That was not enough blood. But we don't know because they didn't testify to it.
Yeah. Yeah, they
So,
didn't actually do any quantitative measurement of how much blood was there, and that is indicative of poor police work. They really should
mhm,
have done that to determine the volume of blood loss. So that means that you have to actually remove the carpeting and the pad where it had soaked in to determine how heavy that was, because you
mhm,
weigh it, and depending on how dry it is and things like that, you can determine roughly how much blood is in it, because there's the amount of weight that it is, in
mhm,
grams can translate to the volume of blood loss. It's a thing. But
yeah,
they said that the blood was still damp in the carpet in that spot. It wasn't totally dry, so they could have determined how wet it was, the thickness of the pad. They could have done some forensic testing to determine how old the blood was based on that section of carpeting by removing the carpeting in the area and then taking sessions of it to do forensic analysis of it. But that was
Exactly.
never done. They didn't care to. They didn't test even the shoe rack that was moved. They didn't test the tables that were moved. You
Well,
know that
and
that
they didn't even test all of the samples that they were given,
right?
correct? Like,
Yeah,
from just overall the samples they were given, they didn't even test all of them.
yeah, I don't think that they had tested all of the blood spatter patterns in the apartment. They didn't even do their diligence to make sure that it was all Rosalio's blood. But I don't remember, exactly which ones they had tested or anything like that. But yeah, the light switch, they had tested one doorknob,
Mm,
with the blood on it. But there was an interesting thing that that someone brought up to me, that the Wisconsin State Crime Lab has some outlines for submitting evidence to them for DNA testing, and
mhm,
some of their outlines are specifically things that are regularly handled by multiple people.
mhm,
So in a situation like this, like public doorknobs and like baseball hats that might have been worn by multiple people, a bunch of things like that, where there's too many people or a bunch of people that might have their DNA on some evidence submitted to the crime lab. And that was interesting to me because I've talked a little bit about cybergenetics and true allele, because those people actually talk about how they can test a larger spectrum of DNA analyses. So in a situation where you have multiple donors, they have
mhm,
a better algorithm for breaking down the information that those PCR tests, that those allele tests, bring, so that data analysis can actually be differentiated between a larger number of suspects or a larger number of contributors, to a higher degree of certainty based on the algorithm, based on the mathematics and the science behind breaking down what they're testing. It's really interesting to listen. It's a kind of a dry listen if you look up the YouTube channel for Trulio, but he breaks down forensic DNA analysis, uh,
mhm,
and why the standards in the crime labs are insufficient in processing DNA evidence, and
mhm,
it's effectively archaic. So they're going through and they're exonerating people or proving guilt in
mhm.
certain in cases. And they were doing a bunch of cases in the state of New York, and they had like a 70%, like out of 80 cases, 70% of them, the conclusions done by the DNA crime, or the crime labs in New York, were incorrect. That is like a staggering number for anyone that is relying on DNA evidence as being, the absolute, right? That this is
Mm,
this is something that everyone should be concerned about. When you're 100% convinced by DNA evidence being the bare minimum, the one thing that can decide the guilt of an individual, and the flawed process is giving you incorrect information,
mhm,
then we're getting jurors that are convinced, that are swayed by DNA evidence that is bad science, incorrect data, for them to
mhm.
make these decisions, and that is a glaring issue that needs to be brought into the public light.
I 100% agree. That's I'm you know, it really is just crazy to me how little they actually do to prove somebody guilty. Um, they don't try very hard, do they? And they just pretty much hope on I feel like they just pretty much rely on the ignorance of people to try and get their cases through at this point.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah,
and
the court of public opinion. I mean,
yeah,
in Zach's case, the mainstream media. Someone had made a comment earlier about
mhm.
this dialogue that started by the mainstream media. Have you read any of the articles that they actually printed in the
I
news
c
and everything?
I started to read one and I couldn't. It shot my blood pressure up and I got irritated.
they still told blatant lies, and a lot of the information that the media got was right from, the PR person that works for Michael Gravely.
Mm.
So they were the ones that released to the press that there was blood in the back of the van. They're the ones that claimed that the sardine can was open underneath my brother's chair in the minivan. They're the ones that claimed that Rosalio's clothes were in a burn pit that my brother had or controlled or had access to. These are all just absolute blatant lies told by the prosecutor. And the intent of that is to try and swing public opinion and to taint a potential jury into believing that this man could have done it. And then you have mass media spreading things that is specifically untrue. So then you have a juror that might not be, sequestering themselves. They're then looking up information on the case. How do we know that they didn't? Nobody
Mhm.
investigated them. Nobody held them to any standard. Nobody looked at their search and phone records during the case. We don't
Mhm.
know that they were on the up and up, and so we have even the titles of the videos by court TV and Law and Crime, obsessed ex-boyfriend murder trial. Those are all loaded terms. This is bias. This, if you ever studied media bias, this is bias in language, bias in presentation, bias that can tweak your perception of what's being presented in the courtroom, and it's done intentionally.
Mhm. It, it's it's disgusting because not only that, it's clickbait.
Right.
They do it for the views. And it's like I get I understand a media company wanting to get views. I get that. But when you claim to be law and crime, or you claim to be a law channel, how can you demonstrate such obvious bias? Like the c- I mean, I don't know. You can clearly see see their bias in the way they labeled your brother's trial, Zach's
Hmm.
trial, versus, I mean, the train wreck we're all watching right now, which is just labeled the state of Florida versus Travis Rudolph. Like,
Hmm.
that should be the state of Wisconsin versus Zachariah Anderson.
Hmm.
That's what it should have been. And the fact that these channels are promoting this dramatized headline just so that they can get more views and more clicks is disgusting. And the fact that it not only do they do it, it sways public opinion. And because the vast amount of Americans are stupid. And so it ends up swaying public opinion, and it's absolutely disgusting. And I'm so grateful that we are allowed now to have these live trials where we are allowed to see the courtroom. Because I mean, can you imagine if Zach's case hadn't got covered? Like,
Yep.
nobody
I
else
can.
gets to see what's going on in that courtroom.
Yep.
All we have is, oh, the facts put out by the district attorney.
Yep.
And now it's made me question every single case that has ever been tried, because
Yeah.
it's okay, these facts that they're coming out with aren't necessarily facts.
Yeah.
It's absolutely mind blowing. Real quick, I'll get to these super chats. Kim with another $5. Thank you, Kim. Didn't appreciate the judge in insinuating the weed was not just weed in his closing. The judge in his closing? I don't remember that. Please remind me.
I'm assuming
Uh,
that you meant that the DA, because he
that
was the one
Gravely,
doing the closing argument.
yeah, he was talked about like, oh, weed is so bad. And that's another thing. With the popularization of weed in this country, I don't understand why they kept trying to say it was a bad thing, because all of us that use it medicinally and we use it for, it is so good for you. The health benefits from the marijuana are so good.
I mean,
Not to mention,
there's
there's
some
some,
stuff that
there's,
isn't good for you too with it, with the abuse of any substance,
well,
right? I mean,
exactly. The abuse of anything, the abuse of food, the abuse,
yeah.
too much of anything is bad. Um, but with marijuana, it is a naturally growing substance. If you use it for the right purposes, go for it. I'm down for recreational, whatever, just be responsible, whatever. It's weed. And that's the thing. It's like nowadays, I feel like it doesn't have the sting it used to have. Like when I was growing up, how it was like, oh God, it's the devil's lettuce. It's,
Don't you remember the dare dog?
oh, the dare dog that was always like, take me on a walk. And the dude's that's like, no,
Yeah,
I'll do it
marijuana,
later.
the gateway drug, you know.
Yep. But like to try I mean, and make it sound like it's this huge nefarious like operation. It's like, bro, he had some weed plants. Like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to make this a thing? But I feel like that's the what they convicted him on was the other crimes. Not even this one.
I think that Valhalla just made the comment about the fried brain. Like,
Oh, yep,
this is your brain on drugs with the egg into the pan. You
yep,
know, that was fantastic. Yeah, the dare. You know, the dog in the trench coat, the cartoon dog. You know, there's
yep.
the failed war on drugs. You know, and that's the reality of it, is that it
Mm-hmm.
only drove up the cost of drugs on the street, unfortunately, and it almost
Mm.
did the opposite of what their intention was.
Well, it did what the government wanted it to do, if you ask me, in my
Well,
opinion. But that's a whole different rabbit hole.
we don't need to put on our tinfoil hats on this. So
Not at this time. Um, but yeah, I there were so many things about this case that are so concerning. And like the hour and a half that we've been talking, we I feel like we haven't even dug into half of the things that you can talk about that went wrong with this case.
yeah,
Because they're just, I don't understand how in any department anywhere would not check the landfill. That was such a big issue for me.
when we
I
heard that, so that was the first time that we had heard about them releasing the landfill without searching it. I was sitting
really,
next to Jen in the courtroom when they said that, and our jaws dropped. And she and I looked at each other and we were like, "Are you kidding me?" You know, these police officers released this landfill. They might have absolutely just admitted on the stand that they robbed the Gutierrez family. They robbed Celia Patterson the opportunity of closure because they
mhm.
decided not to do their job.
Uh,
You know, the Correa's rationale was that they didn't have the manpower, but it was in Illinois. It was a totally different jurisdiction. There was a totally different police force there that they were supposed to call in to assist with this search, and they just didn't. And I mean, I work in healthcare too. That's like a punch in the stomach.
yeah,
The empathy in me was just completely ripped out. I had no idea how they would just let it go because there was carpet missing in a van. You don't know that there's
yeah,
not evidence in this landfill right now. What are you
mhm.
doing?
And have you have they spoken out at all about like, oh, we're glad, whoever responsible, or do they have questions as well? Do
The
you know?
police or
Uh,
or the Gutierrez family?
Gutierrez's family.
Oh, they had their little press conference afterwards, and she thanked Michael Gravely for, you know, bringing justice for her, and then she pleaded to the public to bring, you know, any information forward for, you know, where her boy is, because she wants closure and she wants to be able to put him to rest. And I mean, it was an awful thing to watch, one, because I know absolutely my brother didn't commit this crime.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman is so attached to the idea that they found the right person, that she refused to recognize how non-existent the state's case was.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to paint this like my brother, like, well, there was marijuana in his house, so he clearly was a murderer. Well, that doesn't make sense. That's not a logical connection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just unfortunate for their whole family. And I'm I have never disparaged them in any shape or form. I've only offered my deepest condolences. And like Valhalla just posted, the if you help find Rosalio, there's a place to give and assist with that process. If you believe in justice for Rosalio, please do. We're not here as anti-justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is pro-justice. This means that the person
Absolutely.
that perpetrated this crime gets put in prison instead of the innocent man that's there now. And
Mm-hmm.
then un- unfortunately, this horrible crime had been committed, and it's likely that Rosalio is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever did this needs to be in prison. And Rosalio's body is wherever this person put it. And
Mm-hmm.
that should be brought to light. And for closure for his family, for closure for his children, and for true justice to be served. That's what needs to be done. But Kenosha
Exactly.
doesn't have any interest in it. We had a member of our group reach out to Kenosha PD to get them to release all the Freedom of Information Act, like the interrogation footage and the 911
Mm-hmm.
calls, like all that stuff. They refused to release almost all of it.
On what grounds?
They said that when they thought about it, it was insensitive to Celia Patterson, and they didn't want to harm her any further, and that it was likely that this case was going to be appealed, so they didn't feel like that it was appropriate to release the information, even though it's a Freedom of Information Act issue. And I don't understand why they thought that they could do that, and they specifically just said, reach out to the Attorney General if you disagree with us, and that is startling, that
That is,
now we have a police agency that's making a decision to cover up or to bury information. Uh, this is alarming. This should be
yeah,
an issue that everyone is concerned about. They're protecting something in their discovery, in their information, that they don't want the public to see. This is a
yeah.
problem. They're
Holy
they
cow.
did something shady. And I mean, this isn't even there's like a history of police planting evidence, a history of Michael Gravely suppressing the public record. Kenosha has some dirty tactics that they play, and it's a problem. They have a history
Wow.
of doing it. And I don't know for sure that they did it in my brother's case, but this behavior, what they've done, is
Mm-hmm.
suspicious. You know,
They've created doubt.
yep.
They've created a lot of doubt.
Yeah, Lauren Anschutz is actually on a list, and I can't say for sure, but there's a redacted list where it gives the first and last initial with the rest of the name blacked out, and it's L with a short name, A with a longer name on it's called a Brady list that the DA carries in the public record. So that the public record the DA has a Brady list, which means that you have police officers that have stretched or broken the law, and then they're placed on a Brady list, which is an issue with potential violations of the law. Detective Anschutz is on that list. And I mean, like I said, I can't say for sure. I haven't seen the list in person, but that guy's name is there. It's public information. It was put out in the public. That guy is greasy. That's why he was so nervous on the stand, and that's why he said, "Yeah, we're looking at everybody." To me, and he lied to my face when he interviewed me.
That,
Anyway,
oh God, that this is so infuriating. Like, oh my
yep.
goodness, it makes me just want to like, oh, ugh. The justice system. It's It's
Yeah,
been
Detective
bad
Anshoot
for
suspended without pay in 2008 or something like that, and then he got involved in trespassing. There was a domestic disturbance in Kenosha where a couple had split apart, and he had agreed to carry her belongings out
uh-huh.
into the yard for her to take her belongings away. He didn't want her back in the house, and Anschutz and another police officer went into the guy's home without his invitation, breaking the law, right? Like those are two things, documented incidents that Lauren Anschutz had abused his privilege. That guy, there's something off, and I don't like it.
Oh, I mean, there was something off about, oh my god, just the entire, from beginning to end, this whole thing. I don't It's such a miscarriage of justice, and it is such a travesty that this can happen, and literally the judge and the prosecutor, oops, oh well,
Yep.
and they're just washed of it.
Well, I mean, what are you going to do if you have issues in your judicial system? You got to try and uphold some sort of order. So what you're gonna sweep it under the rug to make sure that people don't notice. Unfortunately, this trial was televised, so they couldn't just sweep it under the rug.
Ugh, and it was so, it's so blatant, and I'm sitting.
And Lauren Anschutz was one of the witnesses for the defense. He skipped town on that Monday, the
That's
last
the
the last day.
How was he allowed to skip town on a subpoena? Like, he was subpoenaed, right?
I guess it ran out the previous Friday. Yep.
That bothered me so badly that the judge was just like, "Oh, oh well. He's not here? Oh, he was supposed to
Yep.
be here?
And then they did a
Oh."
curative jury instruction
Which was
about what the
bullshit.
statement was, which is
It's
it's
bullshit.
ridiculous how many
Yeah.
curative instructions he gave. It was like you can't unring the bell. It's
No.
not possible. Once the jury hears it, the curative instruction doesn't mean anything to them when they've already heard, a little girl, shout, "I was threatened with that gun."
Ah, that should have
No.
been the mistrial. That should have been the other mistrial. Like, there were so many mistrials in this trial.
And the prosecution intentionally dragged it out. They continued to fluff their statements and do things, ask irrelevant questions, present irrelevant stuff. They presented totally irrelevant evidence, stuff that
Yep.
that was not evidentiary or related to the crime whatsoever. They just kept presenting things, hoping that somebody would think that there was real evidence there. It was
Mhm.
all fluff. It was an empty case.
I mean, and that's like trying to bring in, you know, uh just the testimony of the little one had nothing to do with really any of the case.
Yeah, the only thing that
The only thing that
that she
she
had testified to was potentially confirming,
in
the
that
first thing
first,
that they argued was the stalking incident, the night of the early morning of the 25th or whatever it was.
and I would say maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes of her testimony. That was it. Everything else that happened was irrelevant to this case. They intentionally, and that was the thing. They did that on purpose. They
Yep,
100% did that on purpose for the conviction.
yep,
That was intentional manipulation. And that is 100%. Gravely should be
disbarred.
disbarred 100% for that alone.
Yes,
Because, I mean, mm, that, nope, nope. Let me get to these super chats. Gone Jerry 3. Oh wait, there's a third? Uh thank you, Flux. Saw you rock, free Zachariah Anderson. And then so this is Gone Jerry the third.
that's
This
right.
is
Yeah,
Gone Jerry Senior, I guess. Uh Saul, would you say that some witnesses were called by the prosecution just to bolster each other's credibility?
that was what most of the prosecutor's witnesses were because their witnesses were so weak. They brought I mean, think about that. Like Erica Saylor was there to give an alibi to Michael Campbell, and then to what,
Mhm.
bolster his credibility by trying to describe what they had eaten or whatever it was for dinner. You know how they
Which
had sushi or whatever is totally irrelevant. You
mhm.
know that I mean, then you had Eileen Knoll that came in that then was allowed to present complete hearsay, unverifiable by anyone, that Rosalia had talked to her about this idea that he was going to leave Sadie or dump Sadie or whatever it was, and that Zach was a problem. Like, this is total fabrication. It's completely unrepresented by any evidence at all. It's totally hearsay, and it was allowed in. That testimony was absolutely allowed in, and there was no question that it was complete hearsay. There's nobody else there to verify that ever occurred at
Mhm.
all. Nothing. So we have Eileen Knoll that's brought in, who apparently was somehow connected to then feeding Erica Saylor and Michael Campbell this idea that Zach was potentially a bad guy. They're all friends. Rosario
Yeah.
Gutierrez used to date Eileen Knowles. You know,
Oh,
they were a
really?
couple at one point. I think 2017 they were a couple. So Rosario dated Eileen, and then she is maybe still friends with these other two people. You know, so what, they're corroborating together to create an alibi. I don't know what actually happened. Then you have Brandon Hendrickson, that guy who then went to go confront my brother. You know, that's an aggressive act in itself. You're going to drive up,
Yeah.
you're going to interfere with a police investigation. You're going to drive up to a guy's house and confront him on his property. You're going to commit trespassing. You're going to
Mhm.
try and play it off like you didn't have your pistol with you, and then they conveniently glazed over the fact that Michael Campbell drove his mother's car because he had been convicted of a DUI and wasn't allowed to drive his own vehicle. But they didn't talk about that at all, because it's other
Well,
acts, of course. But he still
yeah.
drove all the way up there to try and confront my brother and demand information out of him. My brother didn't know what was happening. Like, that's
Well,
crazy.
and it's absolutely insane because this is also a quote for or not quote, but this is a 40-year-old man whose mother testified to still taking him to get his haircuts and to his doctor's appointments as a 40-year-old man driving his mom's car and shared a bank account with his mother.
Well, I mean, the umbilical cord is long for some people, and culturally,
I guess culturally that makes sense. But
like Latin culture is really family oriented, and
mhm.
I've had some really close, Mexican and Central American friends, and the matriarch always is there to take care of her children. It's always a thing. The fact that she called him Pocho, from my perspective, was actually funny and a little adorable. I mean, if you don't know what that means, I don't know if you looked it up. Did you?
No, I didn't.
It's a translation of something that you call a naturalized or an American-born child of Mexican descent that has abandoned their culture.
Oh.
So they're completely Americanized, right? That they
Ah.
didn't maintain their Mexican soul, and that's
Mhm.
like, it's sort of like it's like it's an adorable little dig that she had on him. It kind of gives you like a window into the nature of their relationship, because she used it
Mhm.
lovingly, and again, like that for me is like doting in a lot of ways, looking at that.
Yeah.
But you're not wrong. She did take care of her 40-year-old son. She gave him an allowance to pay for stuff, but he was up shit creek financially. He owed a
Ex-
lot of
ex-
people money. He was way back behind on
exactly.
his child support. He couldn't afford his lifestyle, and it
Well,
was a
and
problem.
that's I took that as the impression of he spent all his money. He couldn't afford it. Like any of these people kept, trying to come collect. I don't have any money. I don't have any money because he always got his money from his mama. Like, not trying to, I'm just saying maybe he didn't have his own bank account for a reason. I found it to be kind of shady. But
I assume that it was because the government was stepping in and taking his income for child support, so he didn't really
bingo.
have money to do the things that he needed or wanted to do with the kids. So, for her, she was just giving him extra money to make up for that loss, because he had so much outstanding child support, and the arrears and everything else that had stacked up against him. So she was giving him extra money so he could still be present and be engaging as a father, so he could coach baseball and do those things. And
That makes
that
it
like
sound less shady.
from a maternal point of view, like
Mhm.
knowing what, or being even semi familiar with Mexican culture, that totally makes
Mhm.
sense. And I can't disparage her for doing that, for trying to take care of her son and her grandchildren,
Oh, no,
and
I don't disparage her at all. I just him a little bit. I think that speaks to his character,
but I mean,
especially for
I
me.
wouldn't date a person that was still getting an allowance from their mother personally,
Or
but
or exactly, or
that's
that
that's
like
her.
needed their mom to take them to go get a haircut. Like,
Yeah.
mm, but it's just one of those things. Julio for 9.99. Thank you so much for the super chat. Imagine the trials we aren't seeing.
Yeah. That
Exactly.
that should terrify everyone. We were lucky enough that Zach's trial was televised. Think of all the
Mhm.
people out there that didn't, right? Think of all the people
Exactly.
that have been railroaded by a crooked DA and a biased judge that never
Mhm.
had the opportunity to make their trial public like we did.
Mhm.
It's
And
it should shock everyone. It should shake everyone's trust in our justice system to their cores.
absolutely. I 100%. The fact that I've said it, I'll say it over and over. It was the first case that got me was the Rittenhouse case because it was the first time when I was like, "Oh my god, our justice system really is screwed up." And then with this one, I'm like, "Oh wow, okay, it's time for the change." And
Yeah.
think of if we didn't have these keystone cases where this is precedent. This Kyle's case and Zach's case, they're presidential cases. Presidential?
Precedential.
Precedential
Yeah.
cases. And I mean, now if the state just doesn't have a body, I feel like they'll just refer back to this case now. Say, oh, well, based on these factors and these factors and these factors, we were able to convict this guy of murder. So, like, this case.
Well, I
And
mean,
that's,
there are other bodiless homicides that have been prosecuted and won, right? But there's
mhm.
actual evidence that
But
that points the finger, right? So
there's
this is
direct evidence.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so in this case, with no direct evidence, a purely circumstantial case, with more hearsay evidence than ever presented in a courtroom in a criminal trial, that in this judge's 40 years of experience, you're absolutely right. And I don't know how many other homicide or bodiless homicide cases this will be applicable to, but the reality is that the hearsay rulings that were done in this case are precedential in
Hmm.
nature. The ability to infer that guilt, you're guilty if you don't testify, if you maintain your silence,
Hmm.
it becomes precedential. It becomes something that's allowable in our system. These are issues that people really should be concerned about. We should not allow hearsay to make these decisions. This should be backed up with fact. And the
Hmm.
reality is that this injustice means that they're setting themselves up for infringing upon our rights very specifically, because they violated my brother's rights in multiple
Hmm.
aspects, and then there's the arguable violation of the Sixth Amendment right in sentencing, which is
Hmm.
another issue, right? Is that the judge
Absolutely.
then decided that he would prevent anyone from speaking on his behalf, on my brother's behalf, other than his lawyer and himself, and that's unfortunate. I had
Hmm.
prepared a speech that I was going to give, and I thought that it was a,
It was
a good
beautiful.
counterpoint to what people were going to be asking for, because
Hmm.
people were going to be asking for life or death if they could get it, right? Because people that believe that my brother did it believe that his life should be taken away, but that's not justice for an innocent man to have that happen to them. And the
Hmm.
reality is that those people are clouded by grief. Their reason, their ability to see the evidence, what they're trying to extrapolate out of this is something that is completely muddied by their own grief, loss, anger, and frustration. and I understand that was where they were coming from, and of course they were going to ask for that. That's not shocking to any of us that they were angry, that they were distraught, that they were grief stricken. But the truth is that the flip side of that is if my brother didn't commit this and he's a good man, then we should be able to present that to the court for the judge to consider, because everyone's sentence is supposed to be individualized. So
Exactly.
the fact that they didn't, the fact that he just decided, well, you can speak on your behalf, and we'll just go with that because I've already made up my mind. I'm not
Mhm.
going to bother reading these letters because I've already made up my mind. Um, and that those disparaging comments, those things that he did are also just a further testament of more evidence that indicate his judicial bias.
Mhm. I yeah. Real quick, Emily Gale again. Some for Flux, some for the Give Send Go. I challenge others to beat my donation. Yes, guys, I have it pinned in the chat. Thank you for the 1999, Emily. I really appreciate it. I have it pinned in the top of the chat. It is actually I can because I have it on this screen. I'll just bring it up, and I'm gonna say, I'm glad I'm glad the cover picture got changed because I was like, ugh, that picture in court. We need the family picture. I love
Yeah.
this picture. This is a good picture.
Did you see the
Uh
update?
I didn't read it right before.
So we just posted an update for the Give Send Go, kind of where we're at, and it discussed the
Okay.
sentencing and things like that.
Mhm. On the Facebook?
Yeah, no, right there. Just scroll
Oh.
down a little bit. It says
Oh, March
update number
30th. Okay.
2 right there,
There we go.
May 30th.
All right, guys. First, we'd like to say thank you again to every person that has generously donated money. Prayers, concerns, we're forever grateful. Second, Zach's sentencing occurred May 16th, 2023, as scheduled. Unfortunately, no one in our family was allowed to speak on Zach's behalf at sentencing, despite the fact that sentences are supposed to be individualized based on many factors, including the character of the defendant. Regardless, Zach handled the hearing with as much grace as anyone could have in that situation. He was also finally allowed to speak on his own behalf, which I have transcribed here. And then we have Zach's statement down here. I Do you want to read his statement? I feel like you might be able to read it better.
Sure. Here, I'll pull it up on my screen so I can see it.
I really. Mm.
Said, I don't want to go into all the details of the case. I got a lot to dispute about what was said, what was portrayed. I think the facts, with a little more scrutiny, tell a much different story than what the jury decided. And I don't think that things played out fairly. I think that there's some things that are not just from our side, questions outstanding for both sides. And I don't think the court accomplished what it set out to do by any means if both sides are left with so many questions. And I don't think, without going into the case, I don't think we really got to the heart of the matter. What I can tell you is I didn't kill anybody. What I can tell you is I didn't stalk anybody. What I can tell you is I didn't dispose of any corpse. It's really weird to be sentenced for or convicted for it and soon to be sentenced for it, but I didn't, judge. It kind of feels like there's no turning around on that now. I don't really know how to make a better statement of my position, but I disagree. I'm innocent. I don't know what you're going to decide. I don't know what you're going to weigh. I don't even know how to represent my own character without having my family be able to testify in my behalf. But they do have some things that are relevant. I mean, even in this, during the trial, there was a gentleman who tried to come up and talk to me. I think there was a comment about how everything has happened during the trial when he made that attempt. Nobody really knew who he was, and I do know who he was. He's a man who I saved from assault in jail. He's actually related to one of the jailers, and my heart went out to him because I know he appeared inebriated, and I know he struggles, and I know he was coming up here to talk to me because we got along so good. But those tiny little moments throughout somebody's life, nobody accounts for those. What they do, but what they do a really good job of is making up all these things that they want you to believe when they can label you as a monster. I still don't. It's still weird. I want to be remorseful for I am for the things I did wrong. You're welcome to sentence me for everything I did wrong, just like the judge in South Dakota. The only thing that I disputed in that instance was whether or not I was coming back to Wisconsin with that, which the prosecution is now repeatedly made false statements about on their own assumptions, hoping that everybody in this courtroom, everybody that is watching this, would buy. Oh, yeah, he was bringing something back to Wisconsin. Not true. Was I caught with marijuana in my car? Yeah. Yeah, I was. Should I have? No. Did I bend the rules there? Broke them. Broke the rules. And when they said, hey, this is a problem, I said, well, I did knowingly, and I'll be held accountable for it. That's it. And if I killed somebody, whatever that situation was, I can tell you in my own heart, it wouldn't be intentional. But I didn't at all. A guy I never met? I don't really know. I don't know what this is, but I didn't do it. I'm innocent, Judge. Not guilty. I'm innocent.
That was such. Thank you for reading that.
Mhm.
That was a beautiful statement, I think, on his part. Um, I really love the I'm not guilty. I'm innocent. Um, that not having the ability to speak on his own behalf weighed heavily on Zach the past 3 years. So it was a relief for him to finally be able to speak the words publicly. I'm innocent. We get a lot of great questions about why he didn't testify at his trial. And the most simple answer is because everyone has the right against forced self-incrimination per the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution. And the more complex answer is it would not have benefited him at all. Not only does the prosecutor then get the ability to try to further impeach his character and credibility, but 9 times out of 10, no one believes what the defendant has to say, anyways. A a defendant's perceived credibility is already very low simply because they have charges brought against them, and most people will dismiss their testimony as being perjured to their own benefit.
The judge
Even
did
if
that
they
to him.
I did not like what Schroeder said to him about, oh, thank you for not
Thank you for
coming
not
up here and perjuring
perjuring
yourself.
this
Like,
court. Yeah.
I thought that was so incredibly disrespectful, and I that was I
It's
think
another statement of his bias. I mean,
yeah,
he literally looked at him and said, "Well, I know you're guilty. Thanks for not coming up and perjuring the court. Thanks for not telling lies in my courtroom."
yeah, he basically thanked him for not testifying.
Yeah.
And that 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 struck a really deep nerve. Um
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. You can go back to.
yeah. Oh, no, that's all right. It, it bothered me so badly that he would just sit there and be like, "Oh, thanks for not coming up here and testifying and lie like a lot of people do." Like, uh, due to these reasons, Zach's legal counsel advised against him taking the stand to provide his own testimony. Uh, We did expect a life sentence to be issued at the hearing per Wisconsin minimum sentencing guidelines, but Zach's full sentence, this is the full sentence. So he got 2 years for the stalking on count 1, 2 years for the stalking on count 2. Count 3, first degree murder, intentional homicide, is life in prison with eligibility for extended supervision after 40 years. And then count 4, hiding a corpse, 6 years in prison. I want to know how you prove that someone hid a corpse.
They didn't prove that he stalked Rosario. They
They
didn't prove that he committed murder. They didn't prove that he hit a corpse. None of that was proven in the court, but that's what he got.
I it's incredible to me that you can get convicted of murder when there's no body. I mean, I've said this from day one. How can the government legally convict you of murdering someone when they will not legally put that person down as dead? Like, how
Yeah.
can the government be so confident to say, yes, you murdered them, we're going to put you away for life, but not also in the same breath be like, okay, well, this dude is no longer missing?
Yeah.
It's insane. And it blows my mind that, like, people have just kind of like accepted this as our justice system. And this is the point in which, at least for me, I can't sit anymore. This has been the case to, if this, like I said, this can happen to Zach, it can literally happen to any of us. I take a nap like every Saturday, and God forbid anything happen to anybody I know. Because for those hour and a half, 2 hours that I take a nap, my phone's not moving, so that obviously means I'm doing something. And this case was so heavily focused. I feel like their evidence was the lack of evidence.
Yep. That was exactly it. They had so little evidence that the defense didn't have anything to really defend because they didn't
Mm-hmm.
bring evidence, right? This is part of
Yeah.
the issue that the defense had, is that the state just talked, and
Mm-hmm.
they filled the room with sound, with noise. They provided enough white noise that the jury tuned out. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't provide any real viable evidence. There was a couple of pieces of evidence that they presented. The DNA spec, which we already talked about, Munch's testimony, which is bullshit. It's absolutely lies. There's no question about it. Not only was it coached by the DA, they took the statement off camera completely. There's no video footage of him giving the testimony. So we have no idea what sort of interaction that was. And it's such a completely like non-believable, not just unbelievable, but like it's such a debunked, just ridiculous story that nobody really believed it, and I don't believe that the
Mm-hmm.
jury believed it either. And
Yeah.
then we have the other jail snitch that also testified that he was offered, some sort of deal with from Gravely as well. This was, indicative um, of a DA that didn't have a case, that was grasping at straws, anything that he could present in the courtroom that would try and spin a narrative. It was
Mm-hmm.
non-existent. So you have that as a piece of evidence. Other than that, what is there? It's some hearsay evidence. It's were they trying to prove the stalking with a guy that says, that's peacocking, that says, I'm not worried, that
Mm-hmm.
with a girl that says, fuck with me, I'll fuck with you back, right? Then with that same girl that's talking about, talking with her best friend, calling Zach crazy, and leaning into this idea of stalking conveniently immediately before this man disappeared, conveniently, about a month before a custody battle, or a custody
Mm-hmm.
court case date that they had set already because they're going to custody court.
Mm-hmm.
This is a situation where they just chose to interpret what was there in the worst way possible, in
Mhm.
in a way that they could try and logically make it make sense for my brother being a guilty party. That is confirmation bias in its essence. It never made sense.
Yeah, I none of it makes sense anywhere. Um, Gone Jerry for $2. Just be at Emily's Gale donation. Who's next? We have Eric I over here. Challenge accepted. I did the same on Give Send Go. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
getting the challenge going, guys. And I see it. There's we got a bunch new donos over at the Give Send Go. Thank you so much, guys. I we're all. I mean, no one will ever fight as hard as you and your family. That's your brother. But it does bring me some faith to see that there are people to rally around you guys and to rally around this situation, be like, yeah, no, this isn't right, and we are going to do what we can to help. So I appreciate, and 49.90, that is the biggest super chat I've ever got. So like,
Oh,
thank you.
congratulations.
That's awesome. I
Thanks, Eric.
appreciate you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you. I have taken about 2 hours of your time, and I feel like I should let you go be with your woman now. Um, thank you for coming on
Yeah,
and talking about this with me. Um, I know a lot of this stuff, we've been talking, the same thing gets said over and over, but it's like new pieces come out each time we talk about this. There's a new piece of something that shouldn't have been. And the more we talk about it, the more light we shed on this situation. And I'm extremely grateful to you, Saul, for you've picked up the torch and you've run with it for your brother. Um, and we all appreciate you for that. You're fighting you're fighting so hard, and we are grateful for you that you're fighting for your brother as hard as you are. And we want to thank you, because I want to thank you, so I know that the chat feels the same way. So we want to thank you, for you and for Jen, and for Zenith, for just continuing to do these, and keeping up, the despite your own personal lives, despite having your own things that you deal with, you're still setting aside this time, to fight for your brother and to speak for your brother. And that's something that we appreciate, and that you're doing a good job, man.
thank
You're
you.
doing a good job. I
Thank
don't
you.
know if anybody's told you, but you're doing a great job.
That's the least I could do. My brother's always been, you know, above and beyond brother for me. He's always, put himself out there to try and pull my ass out of the fire when I needed it, and he'd do the same thing for me in a heartbeat, without any question, without looking back. So just just an important thing to recognize that like we started this out talking about, this is not unique to my brother. This case was an unfortunate reality, and for those that disparage the idea that this could happen to them, they are dead wrong,
Mm.
absolutely wrong. God forbid that does happen to you or anyone that you love, because it is not how our justice system is supposed to work. It is not what justice is, and it's unfortunately the reality that we have to live with.
Yeah. Do you want to I don't know, it's Bonfire, right? Where we get our t-shirts?
Yeah, bonfire. Do you have the links?
I don't have the links. I had the links when I bought the t-shirts, but I don't.
Here, let me.
Chat, uh chat, give me the link. I know
I'm gonna
somebody in
throw it in
chat's got the
private
link.
chat right now.
Oh,
There, you have it in
sweet.
private chat with the Facebook group,
Oh,
the
nice.
Give Send Go, and both links to the white T-shirt like you're wearing, and then these T-shirts as well. We've got we've got the
Yes.
T-shirts that are
Mine's
that are
got
getting
the
launched.
mine's got the other one with the free Zachariah Anderson across the
Yeah,
bottom.
yeah, just like
Yeah.
that one. Yeah. So so
And I'm
we have the
oh,
T-shirts swag. So if you wanna support it and help spread the word, make it a conversation, please. There's hoodies, there's like tanks, crew necks, V necks. There's two different links. One is for the plain white, like Flux is wearing, and the other one is for a multitude of colors that you can order. There's black, the maroon. There's a few other colors. Uh, but you feel free to purchase those. All proceeds go towards the Free Zachariah Fund. We also have the Give Send Go to give directly, which you had pulled up earlier. Please donate. We're ordering the transcripts. I'm waiting to hear back from the court as to how expensive that is. And after
mhm,
we hear about how expensive it is, then we're going to be investing in experts, because we need to be able to arrange or organize experts. That means private investigators to look
mhm,
at different aspects of the case to try and bring exculpatory evidence to the court to make sure that when this does get to the Court of Appeal, that we have the strongest case possible, so my brother doesn't rot in prison for longer than this first round. And it's not likely that the Court of Appeals overturns it statistically, but the reality is that with all of the things that occurred in my brother's case, we have a very strong case for appeals. So we're crossing our fingers that we actually have a judge in the appellate court that is going to look at this critically and look at the execution of the law and what was done with the handling of the evidence, with the refusal to take the case even out of a jurisdiction where it was impossible to get a fair trial, with the jury, with the judge, with the prosecutor, with other judges, where they denied his habeas corpus, they denied his change of venue, where that happened, where the judge then denied the Danny motion. I've talked about that against
mhm,
Michael Campbell. There's a bunch of things that were decided by the judge, a bunch of things that were presented, and things that were done, and including the misconduct by Michael Gravely, the unethical conduct by Michael Gravely, refusing to recuse himself of a case where he's inserted himself as a witness. There's so many issues with this. So that's what we're hoping for. We're organizing for that. Next steps, we need to continue to raise awareness. That's what we're here doing today. Please join the Facebook group. We're doing that. I have a few threads working on there. We have some regulars, some moderators that are willing to answer a lot of questions, a lot of things that they've witnessed and listened to, and dug through the evidence themselves. We're organizing information from the trial there. We're asking people that have video editing skills, if we can make some shorts, to continue to get people to engage, and then people that have Twitter. We're trying to gather together to make one of those little tweet storms, to try and organize those things. So all of those are strategies to try and get the word out there. We need people to
mhm,
understand that the number one priority is to continue to spread the word. If
mhm.
we raise awareness on the issue, the more people that recognize this as injustice, the better off our whole movement is, the better off we all are. And realistically, if there's ever going to be legislation that's ever passed, we need to raise awareness if we're ever going to do something about it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. I yeah, I think that's I don't need to show my stuff. You guys know where I'm at. Guys, go to the Give Send Go. Go to the Facebook page. This is oh, I don't know, I hit something off my desk with my elbow. Um, guys, raising awareness, go to the website, go to the bonfire, go to the Facebook page, go to Give Send Go. Do what you if you can't give money, you know, I time is a very valuable commodity. The research and stuff, if you can't, give money, just again, time, which is spreading awareness, just saying, hey, Zachariah Anderson, and people going, what? And you'll be like, oh, well, I'm glad you asked. But yeah, guys, chat, thank you for tuning in tonight. I love all of you. I love all of my mocha dicks and my basement dwellers. Thank you for all the super chats and the memberships tonight, guys. I really appreciate you. Guys, free Zachariah Anderson. Let's get it going. Be excellent to each other.